Good evening and welcome to the 2023 Free Agency Outlook. On the board here, we have some of our top free agency moves, and of course, on the top left-hand corner, we have the list of players that are still free agents. So Eric is here with me. Eric, how you doing today?
Doing well. How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. So we're going to go back and forth down the list here, give our thoughts, opinions, and stuff about these free agency signings, as well as the players that are still, up for signings and stuff, and are they going to stay with their teams? Are they going to go back to original teams or something? So we're going to start off. I'll start off with the first one here. So we have Tyler Bertuzzi, finished the season with the Boston Bruins, who got knocked out in the first round, and he has signed with Toronto. So this will be interesting to see how he works with other players like Mr. John Tavares or Mr. Willie Nylander or Mr. Austin Matthews. So, Eric, what are your thoughts on Bertuzzi going to Toronto? Any good ideas or?
Given Boston's cap situation, it was kind of a foregone conclusion that he'd be gone, but it has to sting as a Bruins fan, I guess. But he's going from one team that had cap situations to another team with cap situations. Now, the rumor is they signed him to a one-year deal along with another guy because they're hoping that if Nylander doesn't pan out, they can just sign Bertuzzi to a long-term deal. But I think his goal signing with Toronto is to potentially compete for a cup. I mean, they made it past the first round for the first time in, 20 years this year. So maybe Toronto's just trying to capitalize. Bertuzzi's a good player. I just don't think he's the guy who's going to win you the cup, in my opinion. Now, the next guy was the guy I was just about to talk about there, Max Domi, who finished last year with the Dallas Stars. He started the year with Chicago, was traded at the deadline. He also signed with Toronto. And again, it's a one-year deal. The hope is that he signs and plays well enough. But regardless, Domi and Bertuzzi are very similar players. They're both streaky. They both are gritty when they have to be. So it's interesting that they signed both of them. I personally like Domi's contract a little bit better. He's getting $2 million less, I think, than Bertuzzi. But he also has not proven as much, and he's a bit more streaky. So it'll be interesting to see Domi and Bertuzzi playing together in Toronto with all the players that you had mentioned before. Of course, Austin Matthews being the big one. How do you feel about Domi?
Well, you definitely hit the nail on the head when you're talking about he's similar to Bertuzzi being streaky. A player I would compare him to is Eric Haula, for obvious reasons that these are players that are just jumping from teams every season or two because they're so streaky, and they'll get on a hot point streak and then it'll fizzle out, or they get injured and then they'll just get traded. So it'll be interesting to see what he can do in Toronto. I think the pay is, I guess you could say he deserved that pay, but his performance will definitely have to rely on that. So hopefully, I'm hoping he can play better. Obviously, the past teams he's been with, Dallas, Chicago, Carolina briefly, I would say that Toronto is the best team out of those past 3 ones. So we'll see what he can do. Hopefully he can play better and become a better player. So that moves us on to Mr. Revo 5, Ryan Reeves, Mr. Enforcer. So this guy, man. First of all, it sucks that he didn't win the Cup with Vegas. Sorry for him. But Reeves was on the New York. Was he on? No, who was he on? Who was he on last season?
New York.
He was with the Rangers, right? Okay. And then, so now he went to Toronto as well, so he joins Domi in Toronto. So, obviously, Toronto right now is more skill players than physical players. You have some other players there, but Reeves is more of a step-up guy. And then, of course, with Tavares and stuff, and all the hate he gets, going to play on Long Island because he played so many years there. I don't know. So I just see that as a physical aspect. They just stepped up and was like, all right, let's sign him to a contract. And I don't have the parameters of exactly what the contract was.
3 years, $4 million, basically.
Okay, so nothing huge. So we'll have to see how he lasts there. But yeah, definitely a physical sign. So what about you? What are your thoughts?
So I just did a little research on him real quick. So he did start the year with the Rangers, but he was struggling immensely at the start of the year. So they did trade him to the Minnesota Wild, where he spent the remainder of the season. Reeves, you hit the nail on the head, to use what you said earlier. Great enforcer, great physical guy, but I mean, I think when you're signing a player like Ryan Reeves, you're envisioning a deep playoff run, and you need to have those guys who can deliver hits, are not afraid to throw down the gloves and fight. Especially in the East, where you have the potential of playing like a Tom Wilson in the playoffs or a Brad Marchand in the playoffs. You want to have someone that can drop a heavyweight. Milan Lucic, if you play Boston, you want to have a heavyweight that can drop the gloves. So Reeves fits that role pretty well. The other two guys that they had signed, Toronto had signed, are both more goal scorers, but Reeves, solid player. Next on the list, we have our first player that did not sign with the Toronto Maple Leafs, and that is, of course, Alex Killorn, who up to this point in time had spent his entire career with the Tampa Bay Lightning when he debuted in the 2012-13 season. So that's, 10 years? 11 years with the Tampa Bay Lightning. And then they kind of, again, cap situations forced him to let him go. But Killorn's a solid player. I mean, he's been pretty good the past couple of years. He started to step out of his shell a little bit. He's a key piece of the cup-winning teams of the past 2 years. Or of their 2 cup wins, I should say. Killorn's a good player. Is he going to pay off the value that Anaheim gave him? Not in the first year, but he's a good veteran. That's a young team. They gave him a 4-year deal for a reason. They clearly view him as a guy who's going to hang around for a while, not just, 1 year, see what happens. So it's a risky signing for Anaheim for sure, because signing anyone to a long-term deal in hockey is risky, but it should ideally pay off for the Ducks. How do you feel about that move?
I think it's about time he leaves Tampa. I mean, we all saw that, Tampa's eventually going to start splitting apart, when obviously they didn't even make it to a Stanley Cup final this past season like they did the previous seasons before. So you knew he was going to go somewhere. Anaheim's an interesting choice because he's going out west, and like you said, he's been playing Tampa his whole NHL career, so he's so used to playing mostly the Eastern Conference teams. So it'll be interesting to see how he does in the West. I mean, the question is he going to remain a solid player like he was with Tampa? Physicality there, skill play was pretty par. Or with, joining a team like Anaheim who's still in rebuild and stuff, is his career going to start winding down, or is it going to be like, he's not going to get as many points with the Ducks, and he's going to end up getting traded to another team, or is he going to end up going a few more years and just retiring? So, I mean, he's already got a few cups with Tampa, so he's definitely had a great career no matter what happens in Anaheim. So now we'll hit this one together, Korpisalo and Quick, since they're both goaltenders. So Korpisalo went to the Ottawa Senators from the LA Kings. And then Jonathan Quick went from the Vegas Golden Knights, and he just won a cup, by the way, to the New York Rangers. So let's start with the Jonathan Quick. Obviously, great career, 2 cups with the Kings. And then obviously last season he goes to Vegas. And, things kind of just seem tense there. Things were well, win the cup with Vegas, and now he's headed to the East. So very interesting. In what we just talked about with the Killorn Anaheim thing, this is the reverse. We got a goaltender this time going from the Vegas, let's just say the West, the Pacific Division, to the Eastern Conference. And obviously they're in the Metro, which is a pretty strong division. One of practically the strongest in the league. So this will be very interesting to see how Quick performs. It'll definitely be an adjustment. Is he going to continue with stardom like all the years he had in LA? Or is he going to, he's not going to be the starter because they have starter goalie planned already, so
Yes.
this will be something to see. On the Corpusalo, not too much to say about that. Corpusalo was solid when he was in LA. I believe before that he was in Columbus, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
But now he's going to Ottawa, which is a team that's still working, still getting there to get to the playoffs. They haven't had a long drought, but he could probably provide them some more confidence. So not too much on Corpusalo, but both, Corpusalo was in the Metro Division before, so he has experience. And now that he's going to be with the Ottawa Senators, which are in the Atlantic, it'll be interesting to see how he plays. So, thoughts about those two goaltenders?
It'd be nice to have Corpusalo back in the East. I mean, he's the type of guy who, when he's good, he's going to win you the game. When he's bad, he's going to lose you the game. He's your typical goaltender. He lets in some of those goals that he should be saving a lot more often than you want to see with a franchise number one goaltender, but that's why really only Ottawa expressed interest in signing him to the deal that they got, that Corpusalo got. So that should tell you right there. He's good, not great. For Jonathan Quick, I still feel for him. 15 and a half years with the Kings, basically 15 and a half years because he debuted in 07-08 for a few games. But then they basically say, yeah, we're just going to trade you, and they blindsided him. I understand why he was upset. I'm happy he won the Cup. Now, him coming east does make sense because he did grow up in the Northeast. He was from Connecticut and went to school in Massachusetts. So it makes sense that he'd want to sign with the Rangers, especially since the Bruins don't necessarily need anybody at the goaltender position. But, yeah, both basic goaltenders they're not big-name moves for sure. They're not big-name moves. But the next player that we have to discuss is Radko Gudas, who was with the Florida Panthers this past year and is now signing with the Anaheim Ducks. Now, he got a bigger deal than you'd expect. He's another one of those enforcer players who he doesn't offer much on the offensive side of the puck, but he will always deliver a big hit when you need him to. So Gudas is the type of guy who you want in the playoffs. You don't necessarily need him today. You don't need him in the 82 regular season games, but he's a guy who you want playing at the end of the year. I mean, it's a move signaling that the Ducks are definitely building for the future, not just focusing on their 2023 campaign, 24 campaign, whatever you want to say. It's an interesting move. I don't know why they gave him that much money, but how do you feel about Radko Gudas?
It's interesting. So being with the Anaheim Ducks now, obviously players like Killorn join him, and both players are going from the east to west. It'll be interesting to see what he does. I mean, he's he's coming from, as we both know, the Florida Panthers, and he's been in the Eastern Conference the whole time. So how is he going to do in the West? And I think it's an adjustment he's going to have to get. So we'll see how that works out. Not much to say on him, though. I mean, he's a pretty good name. He's not a huge name like some of the others we've already mentioned, but it'll be interesting to see. So now we'll go on to Orlov, and we'll also do Brown, because we'll go by twos now just to make it a little faster here. So we have Dmitry Orlov going to Carolina from the Bruins, and Connor Brown going to Edmonton. So I'll start with Connor Brown first. Not much to say on Connor Brown, other than the fact that him going to Edmonton could be another key that McDavid needs. I mean, obviously, McDavid gets into the playoffs, but they need to get further into the playoffs and at least get a Western Conference champ. If, Connor Brown is one of the keys, then so be it. Let him work his stuff. And in terms of Dmitry Orlov, he was one of the players, either him or Bertuzzi, I was hoping that would stay in Boston. They acquired both of them in the trade deadline, so I was hoping, one of them would stick around. Obviously, they both weren't, but now Orlov's going to Carolina, so this will be interesting to see how he plays with some other new faces in Carolina. And obviously, Carolina being one of the Capitals' rival teams, especially going back to the playoffs a few years ago. It'll be interesting to see him play his own team. So, your thoughts on those players?
Orlov's a guy who I'm not happy to see come back to the Metropolitan Division. He is a very good defensive player. He contributes on the offense when you need him to, but he's mostly stay back and play the blue line. He's a good player. I don't like that he's in Carolina now at all. So that should tell you how he is. He's a good fit for Carolina, and he makes them potential cup contenders by joining the team. I think they're still one or two pieces away, but I mean, he's a very good signing. As for Brown, again, not much to say. They need to do whatever they can to help out Connor McDavid and Draisaitl. Do what they can for the two of them, because to have a generational talent like Connor McDavid and to sit here and consistently year after year get knocked out of the playoffs because your team doesn't know what it's doing. I mean, come on. Connor Brown, good player, not great. So we'll see. Now, the next two both involve the Boston Bruins, as the first one sees them bringing back longtime fan favorite Milan Lucic to a one-year deal. Now, the next move saw them losing Connor Clifton to the Buffalo Sabres. So we'll start with Lucic. This is a fun one. Another gritty player who at times has shown a great goal-scoring prowess. I mean, very similar to Max Domi, very similar to Tyler Bertuzzi, except he got really lucky that one off season when he left the Bruins. He had that breakout year. So he got all that money. It's just, to me, it's a move that Lucic intends on retiring after the season. He wants to potentially chase a cup with Boston. So go back to where you were beloved. I mean, I'm sure the fans in Boston are very happy to bring him back. He's not the player he was when he left, but it's good to have him back. As for Clifton, he was a good defender for the Bruins. I know Bruins fans are definitely upset to lose him and Orlov both. Orlov's definitely the bigger name of the two. But Clifton staying in the Atlantic Division, going to Buffalo. Buffalo made some sneaky good moves, more quieter. We're not really going to discuss any of their other moves. So to see him join the Sabres, I mean, Buffalo, we've been waiting for them to start to get good. Now they're starting to spend some money in free agency. Connor Clifton was a good piece to sign. Would he have been my top free agent target? No. But he's a good piece to sign. How do you feel about both these moves, especially since you're a Bruins fan?
Oh, yes, bring back the Luch. Oh, it's nice. Having Lucic back in Boston is great. Obviously, being a Bruins fan, it's great to see him back. It's interesting how Lucic is going to play, because Lucic had plenty of years in the Eastern Conference with the Bruins, and he left, obviously, to go play with the Oilers and then play with the Flames. So, he's had experience in both East and Western Conferences, so he knows, no matter what team it is, he knows what he's going up against. So it'll be interesting, because he'll be playing with players, like the veterans, like Marjan and Pastrnak, that are more used to just playing Eastern Conference teams, except if they go on that Western road trip. So, he can possibly provide a lot more insight on the other team's players and stuff, especially since it's been a few years since he's been gone. So Connor Clifton, yeah, it sucks to see him leave leave the Bruins. Him and, like you said, Orlov, I was hoping one of them would stay, but they ended up going. Clifton going to Buffalo, potentially my number 2 favorite team. We don't know, we'll see. But Buffalo is interesting, like you said. Other names we're not going to mention at the moment that Buffalo has got. So they're throwing a bunch of players in the mix over there in Western New York. So this will be very interesting. This could be a season that potentially gets Buffalo in the playoffs to actually get their fans back into it. So,
dare I say it? Let's go Buffalo.
Yes, let's go Buffalo. So with that said, let's go into the next two. We have Mr. Max's of Patches, Max Pacioretty, to the Capitals, and then Bunting to Carolina from the Toronto Maple Leafs. So Pacioretty, obviously, we know he had signed with the Hurricanes, ended up getting injured early in the season, out for the rest of the season. What a waste of money by the Hurricanes. Definitely not worth it. I don't know why they even thought about signing him for that 1 year or whatever it was. No surprise he was gonna move no matter what. It was pretty obvious. To the Capitals, it's interesting. We'll have to see how it comes when he comes back, and he plays next season. I mean, who knows? He could play 2 games and get injured again and just retire. Because he's had a long career already with the Canadiens and going over to Vegas, and he's So I don't know how much longer he has in him. So, that's a risky contract that he signs with the Capitals. I think it was 2 or 3 years, if I'm not mistaken.
1 year.
1 year, okay. So they're taking it just like the Hurricanes did, by ear to see how he does. So that's interesting there. And then going next to Bunting, we have him going to Carolina from the Maple Leafs. And then so I'm going to Carolina from the Maple Leafs. This will be very interesting to see what happens here, because he's going from a good team to a good team. And both teams, Toronto and Carolina, are both on the rise and have been on the rise. So, he's going from Toronto, all the Matthews, Tavares, Nylander, Kapanen, whoever it may be. It's Carolina that has plenty of good players like like Aho, like Svechnikov, that's hopefully come back from his injury. So this will be very interesting to see how Bunting adjusts to the Carolina. So, Eric, if you are on the line, which you should be,
Yes.
what thoughts on Pacioretty and Bunting's switch teams?
Bunting, I mean, he's a good role player. I really don't know too much about him. He's probably more of a second line, third line player. I didn't watch a lot of Maple Leafs games in the past few years. I mean, it is what it is, but he's got the potential, and I mean, I like his fit in Carolina. Like you had said, Aho, Svechnikov. These are guys that bringing in help for them doesn't hurt the team. You can't have too many good young forwards on your team within reason. As for Pacioretty, it's a dang shame he consistently gets hurt year after year. You feel bad for him, especially since I do like the Canadiens to an extent. I remember him playing there. It's a shame. I hope he doesn't have to retire soon, but seeing him now going to Washington, it makes sense. The Capitals, this is probably their last year, maybe one other year after this one, where they actually have a chance to be cup contenders in the Ovechkin era. So that's probably how they were able to get him to sign. They said, hey, listen, buy low, we're going to gamble. If you can stay healthy, he'll be a great pickup. I think you probably were a little aggressive towards him, saying I don't know why they wasted their money on Pacioretty. When they signed him, you seemed pretty excited about the move. But Pacioretty's a good player, but it's just, like you said, the injuries. Now, what I'll do next is I will mention, now these are some of the guys, the next couple players, these next two guys, I should say, are both guys who were bought out, and that's going to be Blake Wheeler and Matt Duchene. Now, Blake Wheeler signed with the New York Rangers. This was an interesting move. The Rangers didn't necessarily need Blake Wheeler, but again, they seem to have some weird fascination with bringing in all these old veteran wings to their team and trying to get them to work with guys like Capo Caco. So we'll have to see how that works out for them. It's going to be tough. I don't know how Wheeler's going to fit in their offense. Of course, they have a brand new head coach in New York, so it's going to be interesting to see how everything works out. Wheeler probably chasing a cup. This is probably his last good year of hockey left. Spent a long time in the Atlanta Winnipeg organizations. He was, of course, the last player who was with the Thrashers when they were in Atlanta, but when the team moved to Winnipeg. So that era is now over. It's going to be interesting. As for Matt Duchene, that trade was a disaster when it happened. That contract that he got was a disaster when it happened. He's gone now, off your books. Congratulations, guys, you're done with him. Dallas bringing him in on a cheap one-year deal. Low risk, minimum reward. The name recognition alone was enough for him to get on this video, but I'm not expecting much from Duchene. I expect Wheeler to do a bit more, and that's not saying much. How do you feel about both these guys?
Not much to say about Wheeler. Obviously, the thing, like you said, the last Atlanta player that went over when they became the Winnipeg Jets, now going to the Rangers. It'll be interesting to see when they play the Bruins, now that Lucic is back in Boston as well. So a little more meetings there with old towns and old players. So that could spice up that Rangers-Boston rivalry. As terms of Duchene, I'm glad he went to Dallas, because when he was on Nashville, they sucked. they still do suck. They're going to continue to suck because Nashville's a terrible place to play hockey. They can just play their guitars and sing country songs. So Duchesne needed to get out of there. He needs that change. He's still younger. You know, he has a chance to bounce back. And Dallas is not a bad fit for him. He can bounce back for sure. Dallas is a fast-paced team. And they have good, strong players that can, you know, hopefully he can work with well. And I think he has a chance of bouncing back here a little bit. Not really well, but, you know, because it's been a few years. But we'll see how he does. So now that brings us to these last three names here. So we have Ryan Graves to Pittsburgh. Mark Stahl goes from Florida, Cup final losers, to Detroit. Or I'm sorry, to Philly. I don't know why. And then JT Compher goes to Detroit. So quick thoughts. Not too much on Graves. He's going to a Penguins team that, just like the Capitals, is winding down the more and more these seasons go on as veteran players are getting older and aren't going to be playing much longer. So he could be one of the players that, you know, helps build the team a little more, but, you know, it's still going to be a lot of work for him. Mark Stahl, obviously the true veteran, going, you know, being around the league a lot, you know, being with Detroit, with, you know, the Florida Panthers losing in the Stanley Cup final. Yeah, losing. And now he's in Philly. Philly has some very interesting acquisitions that we can get to in another video, just like the Sabres. So this could be interesting. I mean, yes, he's a veteran. He's older for sure. But could he definitely be a leader for all the younger players? Definitely. So this could be another year for Philly, like it is for Buffalo, where they, you know, get back into the playoff, get back to the mix, and hopefully get stronger every year. JT Compher, not much to say about him at all. Came from a very good team. Now is in Detroit, who's rebuilding, kind of like Anaheim is. I mean, Detroit, I say, is on the better end, but, you know, Detroit, with the acquisitions they have, could work well with Compher, and Compher is very strong, and he can definitely put the points in where they need to be, and he's a key player, you know, when it comes into having assists and stuff. So your thoughts about these three players?
I'm gonna go Graves first. He's a good, gritty defenseman. He can get, for a blue liner, he can get the points when you need him to. Him joining Pittsburgh, I agree with what you said. You know, that team's getting old. Captain Concussion's not going to be around much longer. He's one more hard hit away from throwing a temper tantrum and retiring. Evgeny Malkin's, of course, getting up there in age. And then your favorite player on the Penguins, Letang's definitely getting old. So, I mean, you're at the point now where Graves could step in as their number one defensive player for the next however many years they want him. He's young enough. He's gritty enough. He'll fit the blue-collar city of Pittsburgh pretty well. I'm going to skip Stahl. I'm going to go with JT Compher real quick. This is an interesting one. He can, like you said, he's coming from a good team in Colorado. He can get the points when he needs to. He's also a bit underrated on the defensive side of the puck. So I'm excited to see how he does there. But I'm more excited to see how he does as essentially the de facto number 3 option on that team, I'd say, behind, of course, DeBrincat and Larkin. So it's going to be interesting to see how that pans out for him. He's no longer going to be with McKinnon. He's no longer going to be with all these players in Colorado that have been in and out of the lineup. So it's going to be fun to watch him play in a team like Detroit. Now, lastly, I want Mark Stahl. As a Flyers fan, I hope you're wrong. I hope the team stinks this year. They need to tank. They need to get a good pick. I think Stahl's coming in because I don't know if you knew this. If you remembered this, but he did play with the Rangers back when they had Tortorella as our coach. Mm-hmm. So he does know Torts. He knows the Torts system. So the hope is he comes in as a Torts guy and kind of talks to a lot of those players that are borderline and kind of says, hey, listen, you know, this is how you get on Torts' good side. Don't do this, do this. And I mean, there's young guys there, a lot of young players, of course, in the Flyers system that are getting ready to come up through the pipeline. So I'm just really starting to hope that they listen to what he has to say, what Mark Stahl has to say. It's good that he's coming here. I mean, you have to spend the money. You have to spend the cap anyways. You might as well get a player like Mark Stahl, who's a respected veteran. I don't expect much from him. I think he'll be a second pairing defenseman. But you got to do something with Provorov. He's gone, and D'Angelo will be gone. Now, lastly, for our section here, we have the guys who are currently free agents. And I don't know if you want to, we'll just go 2-2-2 here. So I'll start it off. And these are both guys that are coming from, that were trade deadline acquisitions by the New York Rangers that are both still free agents in Vladimir Tarasenko and Patrick Kane, both of whom are, of course, right wings as well. So Tarasenko, of course, coming from the Blues before, going to New York. He didn't necessarily, he kind of played better as the season progressed with the Rangers, but he still had a disappointing end of the year, playoff time. He was part of the reason that they didn't advance in the playoffs. So there's that they have going against him. Tarasenko is a good player, but, I mean, we'll get to that in a second. Let me discuss it now. So Tarasenko, of course, it was rumored that he had agreed to a deal with the Hurricanes, but then that whole thing dropped through because he switched agents, and then that whole deal was scrapped with Carolina. So it's a weird, messy situation. Nobody really knows what's going on with that. I'm curious to see where he ends up going. It just sounds to me like Tarasenko wants more money than he's worth at this point. He's using the fact that he basically was the main player on that St. Louis Blues Cup-winning team in 2019 over the Boston Bruins, of course, in 7 games. It seems like he's trying to use that as leverage to get more money than he's worth. As for Patrick Kane, of course, this is a guy who is definitely past his prime. I think he's going to go – you and I both think he's going to go back to Chicago to spend one more year. But, I mean, he spent his whole career up to this point with Chicago until he was traded at the deadline to the Rangers. And he just was a big disappointment for the Rangers, if I remember correctly. He didn't do much of anything. So, I mean, that coupled with his age, why he's still a free agent at this point in time, I'm sure he's trying to use the fact that he was the big name player on those Stanley Cup winning teams for Chicago, where they won the 3 cups. But we'll have to see. Someone will eventually sign him. I just think it'll be Chicago. As for Tarasenko, I think he will find a deal with probably, I could see him going back to Carolina. How do you feel about both these guys?
Both these guys, Tarasenko, I'm pretty sure, I mean, you have the deal discrepancy with the Hurricanes, but I'm pretty sure no matter where he goes, he'll be staying in the East. He was really good with, he had a nice spark with the Rangers and stuff, so, I mean, it sucks. It's not going to stay on the Rangers most likely, but we'll see where he goes. He's a solid player. I mean, you saw how good he was with the Blues. I mean, now that he's in the East and one that we both can say is a more competitive conference, he's showing to play pretty well so far. So hopefully he can get on a team that he can get some fireworks on. So going to Patrick Kane, like you said, he had a little spark in the beginning when he first came over, a few goals, but then it kind of settled down, and now it's like, where is he going to go? He's going to go back to the Blackhawks with the number 1 Connor Bedard that's now going to play there. Is they going to be together on a tandem, or is he going to end up just going to another team in the East? So I'm not really sure. Like you said, his age has been taken into caution, and obviously it's the fact that he's been in the league a long time. So we'll see how it goes. Moving on, we'll kind of speed things up a minute. So I'll kind of